Alrighty, well, if you guys are ready to go, I think we're going to get started here.
Great.
Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Mass MVP Lead Generation webinar with Tribal Vision. Our panelists for today are Chris Cianci, founder, and our Senior Business Development and Marketing Manager, Rob. New title since the last time that we've seen you, so congratulations.
Thanks, Emma. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course, of course. My name's Emma Mailman. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Mass MVP, and I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar. As you can see, we're in a webinar format, so everyone's mics are muted, but there's still plenty of ways for you guys to engage with us. On that bottom bar, you have the Q&A and chat. Please use the chat option to chat directly with us or amongst yourselves. And then that Q&A will be open and we'll be answering questions following the webinar. So if you have them, please ask. We always say, if you're wondering it, someone else, there's a good chance someone else is as well. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. We have 1 hour set aside for this today. We feel that's plenty of time for the content and Q&A. To be respectful of our panelists' time and your time, if we do begin to run over, we will end the webinar as scheduled, but we will be addressing your questions through the email addresses you provided. This webinar is also being streamed on our Mass MEP Facebook Live channel, and it will be available on that channel after the webinar concludes. So if you feel that someone would benefit from this information, but maybe wasn't able to be in attendance today, you can send them over to the Mass MEP Facebook page. Chris and Rob are going to be introducing you to some new techniques to help maximize your lead generation and sales conversion, from how to properly run a webinar to digital management systems, to different platforms that you can all utilize. There's some really great information for you all today, and I hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin lead generation. And Chris, the show is yours.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Emma. As Emma said, I've got my partner in crime here, Rob Meyer. Rob and I, for the last, I have for the last 13 years, really led all of the marketing efforts for Tribal Vision, as well as overseen a lot of the marketing for our clients. And Rob recently, over the last few years, has joined me marketing Tribal Vision. Before that, he was marketing for our clients. So he has a really practical approach to all of what we're going to be talking about, right? Where we always make sure with these types of webinars, you're not like leaving this after the hour saying you got no practical nuggets that are sort of in the trenches that you can actually use. And it's just ivory tower, right? So we'll make sure that hopefully by the end, you'll say, yeah, you know what? I got at least 2 or 3 nuggets out of this that I can be using today or tomorrow and going forward. So with that, the way that we've constructed this really is we're thinking of this in terms of tips, right? So instead of some academic exercise, we're going to get down and dirty with really 10 practical tips that we see going forward for manufacturers to make sure that in this sort of post-COVID world that we live in, that the world has been sort of turned upside down in a lot of ways, even from a marketing perspective, not just a supply chain perspective that you're probably all dealing with. We'll make sure that everything we're talking about here is relevant to today, not 2 years ago. Okay. And again, Rob and I will be both leading the effort. I'll take some slides, he'll take some other. We'll make sure we're adding color to each other. And as Emma said, if you have any questions, make sure that you're reaching out, because we'd love for this to be a dialogue as well, not just us sort of dictating from above. So with that, tip number 1 of 10 that we think that is super relevant is, sounds basic, but it's ultimately most of our manufacturer clients that we work with, the first question we ask is, are you actually working with a cleaned up database that's not stale and old? And usually, not always, but just know that usually the answer is, you know what, we haven't done that in a long time. So number 1, before you do any outreach whatsoever from a marketing perspective, take a look at your contact database, whether you use HubSpot or Salesforce or something more basic than that, like even a Gmail tool called Streak. There's Pipedrive. There's many, of course, that are out there. I'm not sure what you're using. What's that, Rob?
I said countless things.
Countless, exactly. Whatever it is, make sure that first step is, yeah, you know what, let's take a look at our database and let's clean it. Very easy to do. So you're like, what do you mean by cleaning my database? There are platforms out there like datavalidation.com and NeverBounce, where for like less than a penny a record, you can make sure that you are uploading that file to their platform, and they'll then be able to, through their tool, let you know what are the A contacts, B, all the way down to D, where they're old, dated, no longer working there anymore, right? I mean, everyone probably knows the term Great Resignation today. 4 million people a month have quit their jobs. That's a month, right? So your database probably needs cleansing here because a lot of people have probably changed jobs. Okay, so make sure that you're running your contact database through either datavalidation.com or NeverBounce, super cheap. And if nothing else, it's setting you up for at least a higher probability of hitting someone's inbox when you do some marketing campaigns.
Yep. Yeah, oh, sorry, Chris.
I was going to ask if you have anything to add. Anything to add, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely do. So the thing I'd tack on here to keep in mind is that in light of some of the new regulations coming out of the EU, like the GDPR, as well as, I mean, anyone who goes in the news, you're going to see, countless articles around data privacy and so forth. Basically, in the end, things are getting more and more strict with email addresses, where if you are hitting inboxes that don't work, that the email is not deliverable, over time, you do that enough, your domain is going to be marked as spam, and ultimately your emails are going to end up in people's spam folders opposed to their actual inboxes. So there is the lead generation component of this, where we want to be reaching as many people as possible, but there's also this practical security of your own, or health of your own domain, excuse me, that ultimately, like, if you just let this lapse, don't pay any attention to how accurate the contacts in your database are, they can ultimately have negative repercussions on your domain. So this is really a twofold tip, where on the one hand, it's great for lead generation, but on another, there's just this practical privacy concern of making sure that those email addresses do actually deliver to inboxes, and that the people in your email database actually opted in to receive your emails, and that'll ensure that you ultimately aren't dinged by the major email providers, whether it's Google, Microsoft, so on and so forth.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and that's a great point, Rob, because oftentimes we've worked with manufacturers over the years where they've called a list from like a trade show, where all of a sudden they bought a trade show list, and now there's 1,000 new contacts, right? But oftentimes, again, if we're talking GDPR with data privacy, et cetera, we've got to make sure that those are as cleaned up as possible before entering that database. So great point. Okay, tip 2. So tip 1 somewhat flows to tip 2, right? So now that you have that cleaned up database, you can actually start thinking about setting up nurturing campaigns. And so this is where, again, let me go to the next slide, and we can toggle back and forth if needed. But when we talk about email nurture campaigns, we're really talking about leveraging, whether it's Persist IQ, this might be a new tool platform that you haven't heard of, MailChimp, which you probably all have heard of, or HubSpot, which you probably mostly have heard of, where you can now be making sure that you are setting up automated sequences, meaning you might be deciding you're going to send 5 emails over the course of 5 weeks or 4 weeks, where you can somewhat set it and forget it, make sure that you are outreaching to, the 3,000 contacts that you have in your database. Most manufacturers that we work with, if they do have a platform like a HubSpot, they're maybe just using 5% of it, and don't realize it can do so much more than just act as a CRM, right? A database. It really can do very sort of refined, sophisticated automation. Now it costs money, right? HubSpot isn't cheap, right? So you've got to be ready to be spending potentially up to $1,000 a month. If you're really going to be using some of their hubs, they have 4 hubs, right? But they're marketing and sales hubs. If that's too expensive for you, if you're a really small manufacturer, don't have much of a budget to do this type of automation through HubSpot, you can also go down a level in price and sophistication, frankly, but it still can get the job done. It's called Persist IQ. We've used it for dozens of our manufacturer clients, as well as for Tribal Vision. And then if you say, yeah, but I still don't have the $100, $150 a month for Persist IQ to do this automation, there's always MailChimp. MailChimp is, their base version is free, but in addition to that, they've now come up with some basic automation so that you can be sending this first, second, third emails based on what someone is clicking on in that first email, they are moving up the ladder just a bit to be able to compete with the bigger boys. So just know that automation is, if you poll any chief marketing officer of a large manufacturer, they'll say, oh yeah, automation, whether it's through these platforms or Pardot and Salesforce, it's on the top of their list. Without automation, you are doing something very manually, relying on salespeople typically to do outreach, and you can scale this far faster and be far more personalized through these types of platforms. Rob, I'll then stop and pause. Anything I missed here talking about automated email marketing campaigns?
No. I mean, I think you covered it all really well there, Chris. The one thing I will just call out to everybody here on the webinar today is that if we were having this conversation, say 5 years ago, we would have been saying, hey, for folks that have the larger marketing budgets, you want to be thinking about email marketing, email automation. But today, because of platforms like MailChimp and the technology just becoming more accessible, more affordable, where this used to be a nice to have, the biggest companies were doing it. This is honestly today, in a lot of senses, table stakes, where everyone is sending out 3 email series instead of just, the one shot email. And then if they don't respond to that, that's it. And the sales team's going to send another email in 3 weeks. Today, it is very much this scheduled set of emails that are flowing out of a platform, pulling in, their job title, their first name, their company name, merging that into a field in the email so that it looks customized and so forth. But we couldn't emphasize this more, just because, like I said, today, this is very much, it's not the trend, it's what everybody is doing. And if you're not doing it, you're behind the times.
Yeah. And one other point I'd make also is oftentimes companies think, okay, great. Yeah, I definitely want to do cold email outreach, right? To try and get leads in the door. Just know HubSpot won't allow that. Okay. So when we're talking automation, you should be thinking not just cold outreach. We'll talk about that in a bit, but this is for actual contacts that you already have, that you have a relationship with, that you might have even quoted a proposal for, right? Or some type of RFP or PO that you've done in the past where you're wanting to follow up, right? So Rob, for example, the two of us on a quarterly basis at Tribal Vision, we have these nurturing campaigns of companies that we've spoken with that haven't worked with us yet, that are still on the fence or said, call me back in 6 months or in a year. And instead of us having to do that all manually, we make sure that there is something automated that goes into their inbox so that we stay top of mind with those companies. So my point is, it's not cold outreach, frankly. It's instead of really making sure you're creating top of mind awareness in a higher frequency way with companies that have had some type of communication with you in the past. Okay. Okay, let's keep going here. Tip 3, I love this one. If there's favorites out of top 10, this might be my favorite. Rob, I know that you've been deep in this with clients, doing this for them in the past. I'm thinking maybe you're equipped to be in the weeds talking to this, and I can add any more flavor here.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the title on the tip, you should have a good idea of what we're talking about here. But basically, across the main marketing channels, so Google, everything that encompasses Google Ads and so forth, Google Display Network, etc. Facebook, which Meta, I guess, if we have to call it by its new name. But that encompasses Facebook that we're on live with. I hope that Facebook didn't hear me make fun of their new name. But Facebook, Instagram, all the subsequent platforms that fall under the Facebook umbrella, as well as the LinkedIn channel. Each one of these has the capacity for you to upload. You see required list size at the bottom here of our slide, 1,000. You upload 1,000 contacts from your CRM, from your database of existing customers. You upload those into the Googles, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns of the world, and they will take the data in your contact records, and you only have to provide them email address, job title, maybe first and last name and country. Easy enough. You provide them a list of 1,000 folks with that information. The platforms will actually then take those contacts and with their machine learning, advanced AI, look at those contacts and find individuals that are similar to those people that you're already doing business with, but are not in your contact database. And then you can then begin advertising to those individuals that the platform has identified as being strong lookalikes to the people that exist in your contact database. So this is like a super straightforward way to reach audiences that you didn't even, you don't know of yet, you haven't spoken to before. And then with, you see retargeting there. We have that listed on the slide here as well. But from a retargeting perspective, if you upload a list of your current prospects into these platforms, and basically you're letting, by doing so, you're basically letting the Googles, the Facebooks, the LinkedIns know that these folks are high value to us. We want to be pushing advertisements out to them. And basically, after they visit your website, they're going to then see pieces of advertising from you wherever they go on the web in those platforms that are partnered with the Google or the Facebook. So really, really great and powerful way to reach both a lookalike audience that you don't know, but then also stay in front of those prospects that you do, that you ultimately haven't converted to a paying customer yet.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tip 4, we're going to now transition here to account-based marketing. And it's really not even a transition. It's really adding on to, in my opinion, what we just talked about with automation, right? So take a step back for a second. Industry lingo is ABM for account-based marketing. It's really for B2B lead generation. It's not B2C, business to consumer, it's business to business, which most manufacturers are. My guess is of the manufacturers on today, 90 to potentially even 100%, this is going to apply to. And really what account-based marketing is at its most simple form is marketing and sales working together to make sure that they are now like doing a full frontal attack, trying to find the target companies that ideally they would want to work with. Okay, so for Tribal Vision, for example, we typically would say, okay, let's come up with, for us, it's a little smaller than what typical ABM is for a larger manufacturer, but let's say it's 1,000 companies. There's 1,000 companies that we want to be going after in 2022 and 2023. We've worked with sales, right, to make sure that we've identified those. It can't just be done, my point is, just from a marketing perspective. You have to bring sales in. They can be your ears to the ground so you can figure out really who that audience is you want to go after. They've never said yes to you before. And let's use like Raytheon as an example, right? A lot of manufacturers we work with are trying to get into the Raytheons or even Honeywells or General Electrics of the world. So number one, we come up with that list together, identify the accounts. From there, we're going to then start figuring out who it is that we're actually going to want to speak with, right? Because Raytheon has thousands of employees. So we'd want to make sure that we're now profiling within each of those companies, right? Who ultimately we want to go after, right? Because there's decision makers and there's also though influencers, right? So we'll take Mass MEP as an example. Emma, you could argue, is an influencer, right? She can influence, right, Christy at Mass MEP, the head of marketing there, what she thinks Christy should do with their marketing dollars. Christy might be the ultimate decision maker, but Emma and others can certainly have sway in those meetings. So we want to make sure we figure out who those decision makers are, what their roles, titles are, build personas around them, and do the same thing with influencers. From there, step 3 would be to be actually creating content that's going to talk both to that higher level decision maker and also to those influencers. Oftentimes the message is a bit different. So you have to be nuanced with the messaging, unlike email automation that we talked about on that last tip. That's typically, you don't really know the contacts as well, right? And you're ultimately saying, okay, this is more scalable. Here, we're trying to be as personalized as possible with our messaging. Okay, so there is a lot of work involved. From there, step 4 is launching the campaigns, and step 5 of ABM, of course, is measuring, analyzing, right, tracking, and making sure that you're refining. So those are, when you're talking ABM, just know those are really the 5 steps: identify, profile, create, launch, and measure. Okay. So I'll go over these slides somewhat quickly. Rob, interrupt me if you need to, because I've really already talked about all of this, right? In terms of how to identify the accounts, again, that's where you're working with sales, but whether it's highest revenue, whether it's highest lifetime value that you see, whether it's based on geography or a specific industry or whatever that might be, you'll know better than us as to how to craft that list. Okay. And then in terms of identifying decision makers, I think we have it here. We do. So if you see, there are tools, practical tools here that you should know about. Okay. One is called Clearbit Connect. Another is called hunter.io. And then there's a third that we don't have on here called Lead IQ. So just know, practical takeaway alert here. Clearbit, it's a Gmail or Outlook extension that allows 100 free email lookups a month. So if you're saying, yeah, Raytheon, my God, I don't know how to even think about finding that person's email address. If you use Clearbit Connect, you can find their address. It's limited to 100 a month for free. Hunter.io, same thing, right? You literally just have to download their extension. And then from there, you can, anytime you go onto a website, you can right click on that website and you can find email addresses through that website. So even if you don't find your individual person's email address, if you know that it's first name, first initial, last name at, with the ones that you're looking at, you'll be able to figure it out, right? So if you're going after Emma, for example, okay, and you know that Christy that I mentioned is K Grignan, right, at Mass MEP, then you know it's emailman, right? I think with Mass MEP, it's actually just first name, right? It's Emma at massmep.org, right? But
Yeah,
you can
followed by like last initial, so Emma M.
Oh,
It's same
M&M,
concept.
exactly.
Mhm.
Same concept, right? So point is, there are tools at your disposal to be able to really make sure that you can hone in on who those decision makers' email addresses are. And there's a third, like I mentioned, called Lead IQ. And thank you. And with Lead IQ, just know it's the opposite. Instead of going onto a website, you find that contact on LinkedIn. And then from there, that'll provide you with their email address. Okay, so there's certainly ways to make sure you're building out very targeted lists without ever having to just pay for some blind list. Okay, anything to add there, Rob, so far?
I think the one thing I'd throw in there, because you mentioned the Titan in the space, LinkedIn. Do keep in mind that with LinkedIn, we have millions and millions of professionals that have self-reported data in the platform where they're uploading their email address, they're providing their job title, etc. And it's in everybody's best interest to keep their LinkedIn profile as up to date as possible. So when you're doing research, trying to track down contacts, you're like, well, where do I even start? How do I figure out like who the 5 people at Raytheon that I should be speaking to are? It's pretty simple. Go to Raytheon's corporate company page, click on employees, and then once you get the list of employees, start searching some job titles of people that at other organizations you typically speak to, and start to click into those individuals. Once you see job titles that you recognize, click into those individuals and read their job description, because most people list in their LinkedIn profile what they do every day. So you can pretty quickly figure out, is this the guy I need to be speaking to, or is this way off base? This person is in accounts receivable and is not a decision maker for me. So with everything we said before, if you're thinking, oh man, where do I start? Like I said, go over to LinkedIn. Great place to get the ABM ball rolling.
Yeah, that's perfect, Rob. And then once you've built that list, you've built who the profiles of those decision makers and influencers are, you've captured their email addresses, right? Then you again do very targeted, personalized campaigns, right, through email. And here, just know, I mentioned before when we talked about nurturing, think of email outreach as twofold. One is nurturing right from from a HubSpot perspective, where it's existing contacts that I told you, you already know, they've already had contact with you, they're warm. In account-based marketing, oftentimes that person at Raytheon is not going to know you. You won't use HubSpot for that. They'll actually throw you off their platform if you're doing that, because again, remember, HubSpot is really coined the term inbound marketing, not outbound marketing. So you have to be careful about that. You don't want to use HubSpot for this, but there are platforms out there that you can be using to be deploying this type of outreach. One that we don't have on our slides that I'll tell you is if you take a look at Demandbase. Demandbase is an account-based marketing platform that will allow you to do everything that you need. It's all like one-stop shopping in a sense, right? Where you can be deploying the campaigns, and just as importantly, or even more importantly, track and measure, right? That number 6 on this slide at the bottom, tracking and measuring. You might say, how am I going to track and measure? What are you talking about? How do I do that? There are platforms out there that will allow you to know, open rates, of course. They'll even be able to let you know, oh, wow, that contact is right now on your website, and they were on your website for 2 minutes. And so it can be really powerful. Again, it's not free, but if you're looking to get a bit more sophisticated with your sales approach, instead of you having salespeople, oftentimes we find manufacturers have a couple salespeople just randomly on LinkedIn outreaching without any real strategy or scale behind them. Account-based marketing can make up for that. And this type of platform from Demandbase, and there are many others, can be something to look at. Okay. Okay, so that's account-based marketing. Tip number 5, right? We just thought this is a sort of a general tip that we want to make sure we get in there, is especially in this post-COVID world, right? Where handshakes, right? I always call it the salesperson, like handshakes and kissing babies is not enough anymore. It was fine before COVID potentially, and even then it was diminishing. But COVID has fast forwarded moving away from that. Not to say that trade shows aren't important, they are still. But I just spoke with a manufacturer today, actually. They used to go to 40 trade shows a year. They're now going to 8. They're finding their top trade shows, and then they're spending the money that they would spend on the other 32 trade shows, travel, hotel, opportunity costs of salespeople's time at all these trade shows, the booth, and they're typically deploying this or funneling this into digital and social campaigns that are far more targeted. Okay, so just know that I won't go over every stat here, right? But PPC stands for pay-per-click. That's Google, being on the top page of Google, right? 2/3 of marketers find it extremely important to their marketing strategy at this point. Rob mentioned the behemoth LinkedIn. Just know there's over 170 million, business people on LinkedIn with profiles at this point, right? Email is important. Social here with 8 million is important. SEO is important. Point is, we are certainly trending, and we have for the last decade, and it's only accelerated, trending to an online footprint, right? Instead of more sort of traditional print ads, trade shows, radio and television. I know that's not the case for people here, but a movement away from traditional and fast forwarding of digital, social, and automation due to COVID. Okay. Anything to add to this slide, Rob? Or are we good?
No. I think that's good.
Okay. Okay, so we just talked about trade shows, and we're saying, there's other options that you can be thinking about. One that we've put in place for many of our manufacturing clients over the last 2 years is really putting a strategy in place to host a webinar. And it's not just a random webinar, right? It can be, for some larger manufacturers who have the time and resource, we're doing quarterly webinars. And if you can't do that, then maybe it's twice a year. Okay, but just know that instead of you going to a trade show and being one of 1,000 exhibitors, you can actually be the only exhibitor through your own webinar, and you can be the one marketing this webinar, right? To make sure there's, just like what Emma has put on today, right? Doing something like this for your own company, right? And that can be not just to prospects, it could also be to potential channel partners, and it can also be to existing customers, right, that want to know and have an update maybe twice a year as to what you're manufacturing, what the latest and greatest is, what's the next product launch, what they should need to know to better sell your product, whatever it might be, there's multiple ways that you can be leveraging webinar for your marketing purposes. But most manufacturers, we found at least, haven't done that, or if they have, it's been one and it's been very quick and random and it hasn't worked that well, but it's because there isn't a process that's been put in place, a framework that's put in place, rinse and repeat, that shows pre-webinar how to make sure you're marketing this properly, during the webinar how to put this on properly, right? Emma does a great job with that. And then post-webinar, right, what needs to happen to make sure that, you know, you're just not on to the next, right? You've got to make sure that even now, right, with this webinar we're doing, we're going to make sure that this webinar is recorded. It's on Facebook Live right now. We're going to make sure then this can potentially be used in our own outreach campaigns. Oh, you want to learn more about Tribal Vision or Mass MEP? Take a listen to this, right? You can repurpose this content so it's not just a quick hit webinar. Most companies use the quick hit approach instead of the framework approach to really get this right. So you're sopping up sort of every crumb on your plate from a marketing perspective. Okay, super important. So again, I mentioned this a bit, right? They could be also cool leads, right? Or cool meaning not chic, right? But instead like leads that have potentially, that were past prospects that have cooled down a little bit that you should stay top of mind with. One thing I would say, by the way, is, and I know it might be common sense, but just like we're doing here, hopefully you see there's no sales going on. It's all education, right? It's all just providing you with hopefully knowledge so that if you do have a need in the future for marketing that goes beyond your internal team, you think of Tribal Vision, right? You think of Mass MEP to help you out here because we provided you with just objective information. So when you do put on a webinar, make sure it's not about just promoting yourself. It's really thinking through what your audience wants to hear so that they feel like it's a valuable use of their hour. Could also be done for new leads, like I said, your network, partner channels, et cetera. Like a lot of ways you can be thinking about inviting the right audiences to your webinar. Never been easier, right? Hosting it on Zoom, super, super easy, as you see here. Like we said, we want to keep it brief, just like we're doing today. We have about 30 to 50 minutes of some content and make sure that we have enough time here for a QA session. Okay. And again, I had mentioned, Rob, you're going to jump in. I just saw you about to say something.
Yeah. What I actually was slide 2 slides ago where we were talking through potential targets, right? One thing that I think is worth mentioning here, because I've heard it from clients a lot of times when the subject of a host a webinar comes up, immediately like the first thing I always hear is and this is from manufacturers, it's always, well, what are we going to host a webinar on? Like what's our webinar topic? And actually it's funny, is Emma, we were having this conversation before this webinar started, where Emma mentioned that the topic today, lead generation, is always requested. People are always like, oh, can we cover lead generation? And yeah, sure, Emma and her team, they've sent out surveys and they've gotten that input, sure. But they've also been having conversations with prospects and so forth that have also brought up, we'd love to learn more about lead generation. And that's exactly the way that you figure out what the topic of your webinar is you see what your customers, what your prospects are talking about, what they're asking you. If you have 5 salespeople and in a week, every one of them hears from 5 customers the same question, there you go. There is your webinar topic. So you just have to be listening for what are the repeat questions that you're getting from your target audience, the people that you want to sell to. And once you figure out what that question that they all have is, then you've got a webinar topic ready built for you. And you just have to then work through, okay, well, how do we present on this particular topic? And to Chris's point, it doesn't need to be an hour. Plenty of webinars are very effective and they last 20 minutes and have 10 minutes of Q&A. And most of the time, those shorter webinars that are full of folks that were your existing prospects, people convert out of that webinar because you answered the questions that they had and even answered some questions that they didn't know that they had that were related to their, their original what they were originally scratching their head about.
Yeah, great points, Rob. And I'd actually add to what you said just a minute ago about listening to your salespeople, right? Let's just say
Right.
the 5 that are on the ground. What came to my mind when you said that, Rob, was oftentimes we've worked with manufacturers where it's the engineers that sort of
Absolutely.
that run the show oftentimes, right? They're the smarty pants that are coming up with all the new products, and maybe that's how even the company was built up front, but they're in the driver's seat completely. Oftentimes those engineers are way too technical, right? They are in love with the next thing that they're working on, but they have no idea if the market even wants to hear about that. They're in their bubble sometimes. And so I'd argue you want to be listening to your sales team more so than your engineers when it comes to what that webinar should be. Now, if they have some great product that they've worked on and they want to introduce that, and they've already done homework to know that that's what the market's looking for, that's another thing. But we found oftentimes CEOs that have engineering backgrounds, they're all about sort of the technical of the product, and oftentimes eyes glaze over during those types of webinars. And the Q&A is really where it happens, because there's like 5 practical questions that had nothing to do with sort of the technicalities of what was presented. So, okay, let's keep going here. So mentioned all, this framework that I mentioned, right? You got to make sure if you really want to get this right, so that you don't try one and you say, oh, that failed. We hear that oftentimes. Oh, that didn't work. And we then dig in and realize it didn't work because there was no sort of game plan on exactly what you're going to do and when to promote this and post promotion of the webinar. So I know I mentioned it, but here's just an example, right? You want to make sure that a webinar email number 1 goes out 2 weeks before the event. Then there's email 2, then there's email 3, email 4, 2 days before the event. We even have an email 5, right, for Tribal Vision, which is it's the day of the event, right?
2
like
hours
beforehand, right? Hey, a reminder, because people are busy. You're not that important, right? No one's that important in hosting a webinar, right? So got to make sure that you really are, creating that frequency with letting people know without being too annoying that the webinar is upcoming and what they're going to be getting out of that. Okay, so most times, again, when we see what companies are doing, they're like, oh yeah, we put on a webinar, only 2 people attended. It's like, yeah, you did no promotion of it whatsoever. And this is just email. This is just high level. Let's not forget social media, right? We want to marry what we're doing with this framework. We just use this as sort of a basic one for you to see, right? With social as well. What do you should be posting this on LinkedIn. You should make sure all of your employees at your company are making sure they're sharing this as well with their own networks, right? And you could even argue Facebook as well. A lot of manufacturers say, Facebook, why would we do that? That's B2C. I'm on Facebook. Rob's on Facebook. I don't know about you, Emma. You might be on Facebook, right? Like you can still catch a swath of especially younger people at companies that are on Facebook, and they're learning on Facebook. They're not just sort of following the fun posts of where their friends went on vacation. I do a lot of my learning, frankly, on Facebook. So let's not forget about Facebook either. Okay. Again, right, as you can see here, after they sign up, there should be a thank you. Then there's the reminder emails that we talked about just a second ago. And then there's the post-show emails, right? And social media posts, right? To make sure that that you are, again, doing everything you can, like I said, to get crumbs off the plate. By the way, what Tribal Vision does is if you didn't end up attending, but ultimately you signed up, we're going to send you that link. We're going to make sure, hey, you couldn't make it, but here's the link in the recording. Let us know if you have any questions, right? So make sure it's not just follow up to attendees. Make sure it's also follow up to those that signed up that didn't attend, because typically at least 50% of companies or individuals that sign up for a webinar don't end up showing up. Okay, that's why leading up, it's so important to have those emails, right? To increase that percentage. But for the 50% or so that don't, make sure that that you still are treating them like they're gold. Okay, anything there, Rob?
I'll just say those reminder emails, once somebody they're registering weeks in advance, right? Those reminder emails, don't forget about those. Speak for myself. To get into this webinar, and I am a host on this webinar, it was the reminder email that I clicked the link on. And I know that of the people that are in the webinar right now, some of you guys clicked on that reminder email that went out this morning as well. That's how you keep people engaged and get
Yeah.
them to actually attend.
Exactly. One last nugget also is make sure that if you really want to do this right, you also want to build out, if you can, because I know some of you are smaller manufacturers, have no resources to do this, but it's pretty easy to do if you're on like a WordPress. You want to build out a dedicated landing page, right, that highlights the webinar. So that email is driving someone not to just like just a basic homepage, right? But it's an actual like landing page that just focuses on this webinar, gives more information about the webinar, right? Maybe a sneak peek to the webinar a little bit. That same page, you can add this recording to at the end once it's over. So you're again driving everyone back to that, right? So it's important that you think about the marketing assets that are needed as well, so that you look credible and you're increasing conversion versus just random emails and social media posts. Okay. Tip 7, right? So again, in addition to webinars, you can also look at virtual events, right? Again, we keep talking post-COVID world, no more, not as much at least, kissing babies, shaking hands with salespeople with Rolodexes, right? So you want to make sure, and by the way, there's a lot of trade shows that have gone virtual, right? So that company I talked about that I spoke with this morning that are at 8 instead of 40, there are also 5 that they are now attending virtually, right? So just know you should be asking the companies that are putting on these trade shows, do you have a virtual option at this point? And with technology that's out there today, just to give you a quick sort of cool thing that's out there marketing wise for the future, give it just a little bit of time. And I'm talking only a couple years, and you'll be able to attend a trade show virtually where you would be like a hologram in the seat next to people that are physically there. Okay, so there's going to be hybrid trade shows where you can be attending virtually and also be attending in person. And it's sort of this metaverse that is coming. So anyways, pretty cool stuff. But bottom line is look at some virtual events as well. Saves you a lot of money, of course, with travel and hotel. It increases efficiency, right? I'm much more efficient. I don't know about you, Rob. I'm much more efficient attending a virtual event than I am getting on a plane and going back and forth from a traditional trade show.
Wait, really? You don't
Yeah.
you don't want to get on the plane?
Yeah.
Stay at some hotel and have to eat the crummy continental breakfast for 4 days? No, why would we miss those?
Yeah.
No, but
So,
I kid, but yes, I mean, the thing is with the virtual events, every major event now has a virtual component to it. And yes, if you're only focused on shaking hands, then the virtual event is not going to cover all your bases. But for reconnaissance type event attending, if you're just going to walk floors and so forth, you can get that done with a lot of these through a lot of these virtual events as well.
Exactly. Okay. Again, as we just mentioned, check trade shows for virtual events because oftentimes those will be available. Tip 8. So we're rounding the corner here, 11:15. We'll probably get through these last few in just 5 to 7 minutes. Love this tip as well, frankly. This is probably my number 2 tip of favorites is adding video to your sales process. Okay, so Rob and I both use Vidyard, and we're not promoting Vidyard because we get paid by them. There's a lot of others. There's Soapbox. There's others that are out there, but we love Vidyard. I think it's vidyard.com. Take a look. But you can now be adding video, right? Because again, in this post-COVID world where a lot more is virtual and hybrid at this point and remote, you want to make sure that you don't lose that feel of your personality by just having some stale like email, right? Or stale social media post. So I'll give you an example of how you can use Vidyard video. So that email that we talked about in your sequences, that actually could be a video where, see how I am waving right now and you see my screen just like it is? That's a Vidyard video right there. So you can actually be sending an email with me waving in the email. When it hits someone's inbox, they open up the email and they see me waving and for me to say, click here, and they can listen to me speak about whatever I want to speak about, right? If I'm a salesperson, it's, hey, hate to bother you, but we got this great thing, but we had an upcoming webinar or virtual event or whatever you want to talk about. you can actually then do through video instead of boring text. Okay. And if nothing else, you're going to create a wow factor, right? To be like, my goodness, look at this. And it's like shared across an office oftentimes with this cool tool. And it's been out there for a while now, you know, so it's, as Rob said, it's not like, oh, wow, this is cutting edge. This has been out there now for some years. And if you're not using video, you are behind the times. Same thing with the social media post, right? You can be posting. Rob and I are going to be working on soon instead of just doing the Tribal Times e-newsletter that goes out, we can be talking, you know, in our newsletter, right? So 4 times a month, it can be, all right, having Rob talk about all the great things that are happening at Tribal Vision instead of them having to just read about it. Or it can be a hybrid with the newsletter, right? The point is you want to be thinking of all the ways that you can be incorporating video into your marketing and sales approach. Those account-based marketing emails, again, right to Raytheon, as I mentioned, why wouldn't one be a video? Okay, so you want to be thinking about that. It's very engaging. It's far more engaging, of course, and higher converting than just boring text. Okay.
You know, the last thing I'll add here is if you see, hey, this slide is fine. You see screen is highlighted on the Vidyard pop-up there, but you see next to it screen and cam. What that screen and cam option does is that you're able to screen share, and then in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, there'll also be a feed of your video. So they're actually seeing you talk. This is super useful in you know, a lot of different contexts, but one that I will call out as I use it all the time is if you have a quote or if you have a proposal go out to a prospect, don't just throw that proposal in an email. Here you go, and let me know when you want to talk through it, because that it might die right there. Instead, attach that proposal, that quote, and then also record a quick video where you've got it on your screen. You're talking through the proposal, answering the questions that you anticipate them, you know, having once they take a look at it. And it really just provides that much more a personal touch. And it makes sure that they're not going to just, you know, gloss over whatever copy you put in your email, and they're actually going to listen to what talking points you have. And a lot of times it's going to get you to where that next follow-up conversation that you have after they've reviewed your proposal, they're actually asking hard-hitting, real questions. They're going to get them to the point where they're ready to convert, opposed to the just high-level, well, why did you arrange it this way? I don't understand what this is. You've already explained all that. So they're coming in actually ready to start talking, you know, conversion, rather than, can you just make sense of what I'm looking at right now?
Yeah, you can make sense of it through the video. Exactly. Yeah, we use that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and by the way, one other way that we use it is even with our partners, right? So, and even internally. So I'll just give a very quick example. Interdepartment at Tribal Vision. I just today, right, there's a social post that's going to be going out from Tribal Vision about the 4th of July. Our social media team sent me a graphic. I wanted to be brought to a different level. I then use video to say, hey, here's the graphic that you sent me. Can you change this? And can you do this to that? They can see me on the screen. They can see the graphic on the screen. They can hear me talk to it. Do you know how much more efficient that is than just having an email back and forth? It saves so much time. Same thing with partners, right? If we have a web designer helping us on the outside with a website, I'm just going to then share my screen of the website and say, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. It's far more efficient than back and forth email or even a phone call. So, okay, let's keep going here. We already showed this. This is what Rob was talking about.
Oh, yeah, shoot, it was. I
Rob
made
in
a slide
dark
about
closet
it.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem too happy, but anyway, you look really intimidating there, Rob.
Yeah, I think it's the angle.
Maybe the beard. I don't know. I wouldn't want to meet you in a dark alley right there.
Yeah, no.
Anyways,
That's a fun one.
So anyways, this is
I'm gonna have to change the setting I use to record those.
But this is
business with this guy. Scary.
This is the cam and screen approach, right? So here he is on camera talking to this screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is, and again, you can be setting up a dedicated
Let's
landing.
see, that one's there. That's a little bit more personal.
That's much better. Much better. Like it. So anyways, by the way, the cool thing with this slide is notice there's the Tribal Vision background. So you could actually have a link in your email to this video. Someone clicks on the link and it brings them to this embedded video within your branded landing page. Pretty cool. Okay.
And also, you know, the other thing, I think it's called out, the call out there, but it's great to use that landing page because then you don't have to worry about how long the video is. Oh, can I add it as an attachment? Is file size too big? Just send them a URL and they click there and boom, they've got the video. You don't have to worry about anything.
Yep, perfect. Okay, last two tips here. Emma mentioned this in the beginning when she mentioned that sort of our nuggets, digital asset management platforms, otherwise known as DAMs. Again, post-COVID worlds. It's sort of I guess it's still a little bit cutting edge, frankly, because we still don't see many companies using this, but we use it at Tribal Vision. It's super powerful. Just think of it as a way then for sales to happen virtually, right? Meaning, I'll just, again, give a practical example of how we use it. So let me go to the next slide here. So we use, there's many providers of these DAM solutions, which I'll explain in a second. We use Client Point. There's others, right, for you to look at. But Client Point, if you go to clientpoint.com, right, you'll read about it. It makes it easy to send proposals, get updates, like completely do an entire sales process online. So here you can see Client Point. I'll just briefly explain it. So Rob and I, let's just pretend, let's just walk through it. Someone on this in this webinar says, hey, you know what? I want to learn more about Tribal Vision, right? They mentioned some grant opportunities at the end of the webinar. I want to learn more. So you reach out to us. We say, okay, great. You know what? Let's set up a Zoom. Instead of just setting up a Zoom like everyone does, we can send you a link where it's like, okay, click on this link and we'll meet you here. And it's branded. It's not going to be branded Client Point. It's branded Tribal Vision. Okay, but Client Point is the engine behind this. You click on the link, right? And now all of a sudden you're within this platform where, see this, these are all folders on the right-hand side. We'll have all folders just dedicated to manufacturers because we work with not just manufacturers, we work with nonprofits, we work with technology companies, but you're a manufacturer. So we're going to bring you into a page that has all of our folders of all of our pitch decks, sell sheets, case studies, just pertaining to manufacturers. There's going to be a folder in there also about our grants through Mass MEP. And then we're going to meet here and we're going to talk just like I'm talking now. You can see me. We're going to talk through Zoom through this platform. Okay. And then from there, we're always going to use this link where I'm going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to give you the proposal now in a few days. We'll forward it to you, but you just have to go into this platform again and there'll be a folder for you for your proposal. And by the way, we can now know when you come in and look at the proposal. We can know how long you've looked at the proposal for. We can look at reports on a weekly or monthly basis to know just how much activity there is in our pipeline. We can set our pipeline here. Like it's endless what you can do with these types of platforms. And it's fully personalized, right? That's the point. And engaging with video. So if we're up against an old school company that just has a salesperson sending an email with no video, no nothing custom, who's going to win? Typically us, if everything else is even. Okay, so very cool solution. Rob, anything to add to this?
No, I think that covered it really well.
Yep. And we can also send agreements through Client Point. So instead of using DocuSign or HelloSign, you can do it all through this type of platform. And again, there are more, it's not just Client Point, there are many others you can look at, but that's the future of sales. Last tip, and I think we're good, 11:25, 5 minutes here for Q&A at the end, is if you aren't using Calendly, you definitely want to take a look at it. It's like less than $20 a month. It's very easy. So if you were interested, you say, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's find some time to talk. Here's my Calendly link. You know, click on my link and you can find a time on my calendar that's available. And it directly shoots you out information for us to be talking. So it's very easy to book time with your sales team's calendars. And you can also even have it, if you look at the Tribal Vision Contact Us page, you can even just make contact with me through that calendar on our contact connect with us page at Tribal Vision. A lot of ways to use Calendly, no brainer from a sales perspective from a sales conversion perspective. And you can do that even with your ABM or email nurture campaigns, right? You can put it right in your signature line. Okay. So with that, I am going to conclude here with Rob. We have 1 minute to just mention that with Mass MEP, we've done this for years. It's just a little bit better this year. I'll explain why. There are grants available if you're interested in working together, helping you put together marketing strategies and train you on that. Same thing with implementing the strategies that we can help you with for lead gen and training you on it because it's under a training grant. There are grants available to offset our costs, and this is where I said it's better than usual, by 100 cents on the dollar for the first $30,000 of working together through Mass MEP. So if you are interested in learning more, just know it's a bit of a no-brainer. If you think you need some marketing help, Emma and the team there at Mass MEP can put some grants together so that if you are interested, we can be working together with, again, both implementing and training you on all of these lead generation techniques. Okay, that being said, Emma, are there questions that have come up for the last few minutes here that Rob and I can answer?
I don't have any through Facebook, but for the people in attendance, if you have any and you want to send them through the Q&A, now is a perfect time. And again,
Awesome.
don't hesitate, because if you have questions, you know, more than likely someone else is thinking the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if there aren't any, again, you can also reach out to either to Emma or to myself and Rob after the fact. You know, we're here to help, frankly, right? Any questions that you might have, if we can answer them, we're going to.
So just give them another minute.
Yeah, sure.
I guess I have one for, I'll pitch one of my own.
Yeah.
For manufacturers that have minimal employees,
Yeah.
they often feel very overwhelmed when it comes to this just because of the time that goes into it. So as far as those smaller manufacturers go, what do you think would be the best starting point for them? So they have all this information, they know they have certain platforms they have to utilize. Just to kind of make that bite a little bit smaller, what would be your best advice for your first step?
Yeah, my 2 cents first step would be you would have us like do a quick audit of where they are. Typically there's not much to audit because we haven't done much, but we would still start with an audit and put together what we call a key findings document, right? That says, here are our findings from what we saw. And then this is what like the next 90 days of practical implementation and training look like, right? We can then put that together and then that prioritizes what needs to happen. And from there, that's where that can fit under a training grant, right? As long as we're doing the training to make sure that it's tackled. So yeah,
that's awesome too, because it kind of shows them a roadmap, you know, like putting your priorities in order. So if people, they really don't know what direction to take first, that way they have steps. It makes it a lot easier to digest for people who aren't exposed to marketing too much.
Yeah, we're very practical. We're not pie in the sky. Like I said, we know there are minimal marketing budgets, right? Paid media budgets of $1,000 or less a month in terms of paid media, sometimes zero. So yeah, we're very mindful of prioritizing what's needed and know that we can actually help tackle that within the 90 days that the grant allows.
Absolutely.
So
and yeah, again, just to reiterate, if there are questions on grants, please send them over to me. You guys will get a follow-up email after this webinar, so you'll have my contact information. But again, feel free to reach out any questions. But before we do log off, I wanted to thank both of you for your time. Thank you for sharing the material. Obviously, the world today is just digital all over, and it's important. You know, we embrace it. We know how to navigate it. We know the opportunities it can bring us. So really important information today. So again, thank you. Thank you to everyone in attendance. A reminder, this will be, the video of this webinar will be on our Facebook page, so you guys can access that. Share it to anyone that you think would benefit from it, people who weren't in attendance. If you were in attendance, you just want to go back, refresh the material, it's there for you all. But other than that, Enjoy your 4th of July. Enjoy your weekend. Everyone be safe. And again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma, for having us also. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
All right.
Emma.
Take care.